Lauren McKay had seen her fair share of mold, dust, and rat droppings. Working as a volunteer photo archivist for the Ashbrook Historical Society didn't come with glamour, just the occasional rusted tin of war medals or the yellowed birth certificate of someone no one remembered. But she loved it. Quiet, methodical, orderly. A sanctuary from the chaos of her former job as a photojournalist in Boston. On the second Friday of August, the air was thick with the scent of mildew. Thunder murmured somewhere beyond the hills. Lauren crouched beneath the old wooden staircase of the society's basement, tugging at a warped cabinet door that hadn't been opened in decades. Inside, among crumbling ledgers and insect nests, she spotted a wooden box, small enough to hold in both hands, wrapped in brittle muslin. The tag read simply, 1890, plate glass negatives, do not discard. She carried the box upstairs, wiped it down, and set it on her restoration table. The building groaned under a sudden gust of wind, and for a second she thought the front door had opened. It hadn't. It was just the house settling, or maybe her nerves. Inside the box were 5 negatives, surprisingly intact. 4 were portraits, women in rigid Victorian postures, men with heavy mustaches, a family gathered around a piano. The 5th one, though, gave her pause. 3 children stood in the center of an open field, their faces expressionless. 2 girls, 1 boy, dressed in formal clothing far too large for their frames. Behind them loomed a farmhouse, collapsing, windowless, and deeply out of place. Something about the angle felt off, like the photo had been taken quickly, maybe even in secret. The children didn't seem to be posing. They were just standing. Lauren held the negative to the light, trying to see details. The image was faint, but there was a tension in it that made her skin crawl. She placed it in the scanner and ran a high-resolution pass, letting the computer do the work. While the scanner buzzed, she made tea in the back room. A faint thump echoed from above, like footsteps on the ceiling. But she was alone in the building. She ignored it. When she returned to the monitor, the image had rendered. She zoomed in to the children's faces first. Dull eyes, unsmiling lips. Victorian kids were rarely cheerful in photos, but when she panned to the left, just past the edge of the girl's shoulder, her breath caught. There was something there. A shadow, not cast by the sun, not part of the landscape, was curled behind the children. It looked vaguely human, bent, misshapen, arms too long. The head was indistinct, as if it had been moving when the shot was taken. It stood in the grass, no more than a few feet away from the children, who seemed unaware. Lauren blinked and zoomed in further. The distortion didn't look like a photographic error. It was intentional? No, present. She stared at the figure for several minutes before printing a hard copy. She needed a second opinion. Maybe from Ruth, the elderly historian who'd worked at the society for decades. But when she showed Ruth the printout the next morning, the woman's reaction was immediate. Ruth paled, stumbled back, and muttered, "You shouldn't have brought that here." Lauren tried to ask what she meant, but Ruth clammed up. "Put it back where you found it," she whispered. "Burn it, if you're smart." That night, Lauren couldn't sleep. The wind scraped branches against her window. Her apartment felt colder than usual. She checked the thermostat, still set to 70. She sat up in bed and opened her laptop. She needed to find out where that farmhouse was. Maybe there was a record, land deeds, maps, anything. But the more she searched, the more she realized something strange. The town of Ashbrook had no photographic records from 1890. None, except the 5 plates in the box. And no one remembered 3 missing children from that year. But someone had taken that photo, and whatever was behind them in the field might still be watching. The next morning, Lauren returned to the Ashbrook Historical Society 2 hours before opening. She didn't want questions. She brought coffee, a notebook, and a determination that had long been dormant, the same one that had made her a good journalist before everything in Boston had fallen apart. The box of negatives sat untouched on the table, but the printed photograph, now slightly curled, seemed different. The figure behind the children, once vague and blurred, looked somehow clearer in the morning light, like the darkness had sharpened overnight. Lauren shook off the feeling and focused on her laptop. She needed a lead. By cross-referencing topographical maps from the 1800s with surviving land records, she narrowed down the likely location of the field in the photo. A plot of land on the eastern edge of Ashbrook, marked in 1888 as belonging to a Wilford Crane, matched the landscape. Today, it was an overgrown stretch of property on Dead Hollow Road, a rural path that hadn't seen a maintenance crew in decades. She checked satellite images. No visible structures, just trees and a clearing. Her heart pounded. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she did believe in evidence, and someone had taken that photo. She packed her camera, a flashlight, and the printout, then drove toward Dead Hollow Road. The pavement gave way to gravel, then to dirt, flanked by trees that pressed in from both sides. Cell service vanished by the time she passed the rusted gate that marked the Crane property. The air grew still. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of her boots on dry leaves. After 10 minutes of walking, the woods opened into a clearing, and she froze. The farmhouse was still there. Collapsed in places, yes, but undeniably the same as in the photo. Same pitch of the roof, same window placements, same leaning porch, but worse up close. The wood was nearly black from rot. The front door hung askew, and the windows were empty sockets. And yet, there was something unsettlingly preserved about it, like time had paused just for this place. Lauren stepped onto the porch, her camera ready. Each board groaned beneath her weight. Inside, the air was sour and dry. Dust motes swirled in the sunlight, bleeding through a hole in the roof. She took cautious steps through the parlor, what was left of it, and into a hallway where faded wallpaper peeled in long strips. Then she saw it. On the far wall, partially hidden behind a shattered hutch, was a handprint, small, child-sized, pressed into the wall as if made in wet soot. Fresh, her blood ran cold. She backed out of the hallway and snapped photos. The camera clicked normally, but when she looked at the screen, the images were corrupted. Static lines, distortions, unreadable. Outside, the wind finally returned, whistling low through the trees. Then a sound from the second floor, a dragging, slow shuffle. She hadn't gone upstairs. Lauren turned and ran, stumbling through the brush, twigs clawing at her clothes. Only when she reached her car did she realize she was shaking. Her hands, her voice, even her breath trembled. She drove straight to Ruth's house. The older woman opened the door, expression grim. "You went there," she said, not as a question. Lauren nodded, holding out the photograph. "Who are they?" Ruth hesitated, then motioned her inside. Over tea, in a kitchen crowded with cross-stitched wall hangings and fading sunlight, Ruth finally spoke. "My grandmother told me stories," she said, "back when I was a girl, about the Crane children." Lauren listened in silence. 3 of them, Esther, Thomas, and Lillian. They lived on that land. Poor family. The father was strange, kept them isolated. People in town said he was preparing for something, teaching them things children shouldn't know. Lauren's stomach turned. In the autumn of 1890, Ruth continued, they vanished. One morning, the house was empty. No blood, no signs of a struggle. Just a single photograph mailed to the sheriff. No return address. Just the image. Lauren's mouth went dry. That photo. Ruth nodded. The sheriff burned it, but someone must have kept a copy. Lauren pulled out the print and pointed to the shadowy figure. What is that behind them? Ruth stared at it, then looked away. People called it the listener. Said if you looked too long, it noticed you. Showed up in reflections, in dreams, and if you kept looking, it came closer. Lauren felt a chill at the base of her spine. That night, back in her apartment, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Mirrors seemed to shimmer at the edges. Her laptop screen flickered, even when closed. And when she finally managed to fall asleep, a dream greeted her. She was standing in the field again. The children faced her, and just behind them, closer now, was a figure with no face, no eyes, just a wide, gaping mouth, open, listening. Lauren woke before dawn, drenched in sweat. The dream still clung to her mind like smoke. She couldn't recall the children's faces, only the sound. Not a voice, but a slow, wet whisper. Not words, just breath, in, out, like someone was inches from her ear. Her apartment was silent, the kind of silence that felt heavy, dense. She got out of bed and moved cautiously through the rooms, flipping lights on as she went. Nothing seemed disturbed, but the mirror in the hallway, it was fogged, like someone had breathed on it from the inside. She wiped it, for a split second, just long enough to raise the hair on her neck. Her reflection didn't move in sync. At the Historical Society later that morning, Lauren sat with the photograph again. She kept telling herself it was just a coincidence. The timing, the stress. She was letting fear twist her perception, but then she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The figure behind the children, it had moved. She opened the original scan and compared it to the printed copy she'd brought to the farmhouse. On the screen, in the high-resolution image, the figure now stood closer, only slightly, but it had shifted, no longer behind the far-left child, now behind the middle one. The distortion around its head had changed too, clearer now, suggesting shoulders, maybe arms. Lauren blinked, closed the file, reopened it, still there. She checked the file history. No edits, no changes in metadata, but something had undeniably altered. Was it a trick of her memory? Or her phone buzzed. A message from Ruth. Do not look at it again, please. Lauren ignored the warning. She needed answers. Back at the Ashbrook Public Library, she accessed the regional archives and began searching through microfilm copies of old newspapers from the late 1800s. Weeks passed by in minutes. The search was exhausting. Headlines about weather, crops, town fairs. But then, deep in the October edition of the Ashbrook Herald, She found it, October 19th, 1890. Crane family missing 3 children, Esther, 10, Thomas, 8, and Lillian, 6, reported missing from their home off Dead Hollow Road. Their father, Wilford Crane, was not found at the property. Neighbors reported strange behavior and sounds from the home in the weeks prior. No suspects, no bodies recovered. Another article, dated a week later, October 26, 1890. Search for Crane children suspended. Sheriff Abner Holt has called off the search after extensive efforts. Locals have begun to avoid the area. Reports of illness and visions among search parties have drawn concern. An investigation into Wilford Crane's activities remains open. Then the most chilling entry from November 3rd, 1890. Sheriff Holt found dead in his home, cause of death unknown. The sheriff's last recorded words, overheard by his wife, were, "They weren't alone in the picture. It heard me." Lauren sat back, trembling. She hadn't hallucinated it. This thing in the photo, people had seen it before, and it had destroyed them. That night, at home, Lauren decided to test something. She printed the image again, a larger version, taped it to the wall across from her dining table, dimmed the lights, and sat. 10 minutes passed, 20, no movement, no flickers, but then her phone buzzed again. Another message, unknown number, no contact name. "Stop looking." She dropped the phone. The lights flickered. Her laptop screen came on by itself. The photo file opened and zoomed, automatically, closer and closer. Now the figure stood directly behind the middle child, its head slightly tilted, a faint hint of an open mouth. No teeth, no eyes, just blackness, depthless. Then, without her touching anything, the printer in the corner came to life and began spitting out a fresh copy of the image. Lauren stood. She was done. She grabbed every copy of the photo and shoved them into a metal waste bin, poured lighter fluid from under the sink and lit a match. The flames flared high, devouring the paper. Smoke rose fast, and with it came a sudden, sharp scream, not in the room, but from the fire itself. She stumbled back. The scream faded. Only ash remained. The next day, she returned to Ruth's house. The old woman opened the door, looked Lauren over, and said, "It's too late, isn't it?" Lauren didn't answer. "Did you burn it?" Ruth asked. "Yes." Ruth gave a tired nod. "Then it's watching another way now." Lauren sat at the kitchen table, heart pounding. "I found old police files," she said. "The sheriff, the children. Your grandmother wasn't making it up. Something happened out there." Ruth poured tea with shaking hands. "That house, it doesn't just hold memories. It holds things. Regret, anger, echoes, and maybe worse." Lauren reached into her bag, pulled out a photograph she hadn't burned, one of the original portraits from the box. A man seated alone, hands clasped tightly, eyes staring at the lens like he could see the photographer. "Is this Wilford Crane?" Ruth's hand trembled. "Yes." Lauren leaned in. "What did he bring into that house?" Ruth whispered. "Not what. Who?" That night, Lauren dreamed again. Only this time, the children turned to face her, and behind them, arms now outstretched, was the figure, no longer in the background. Lauren no longer trusted the mirrors in her apartment. She draped them in sheets, covered her TV, shut down her laptop, and still, she felt eyes on her when the rooms grew quiet. She didn't sleep anymore. Not deeply, not safely, not with the memory of that dream, of the children turning, and the thing behind them stretching out its arms. She had burned the photograph, but the image wouldn't leave, and something else had changed. That morning, when she walked into the Historical Society, she noticed the box of negatives had been moved. No one else had access. She carefully lifted the lid. The 4 original portraits were still there. The photo of the children, gone. In its place was a new negative, one she didn't remember ever seeing. It wasn't labeled. Hands trembling, Lauren placed it on the light table and lowered the magnifier. It was her, standing outside the Crane farmhouse, looking directly into the camera, and behind her, in the shadows of the doorway, the figure, clear now, arms long enough to drag against the floor, shoulders hunched like they were too heavy for its spine, a face like a mask, hollow, and pulled into a soundless scream. Lauren backed away from the table. It had been watching, and now, it had taken a photograph of her. She ran to Ruth's house. The old woman didn't seem surprised to see her. "I found another negative," Lauren said, breathless. "Of me." Ruth let out a slow sigh. "You invited it in." Lauren's voice cracked. I didn't do anything. You saw it," Ruth said. "That's all it needs." Lauren dropped into the armchair by the fireplace, hands gripping her knees. "What is it?" Ruth was quiet for a long time. Then, "Some say it's not a ghost, not a demon, just a memory made wrong. A piece of grief that grew teeth. The Cranes were never right. There were rumors Wilford practiced photography not to capture people but to trap them, to preserve them in pain. His children were the first, then others." Lauren's voice was barely a whisper. "So this thing, it came from him, or through him," Ruth said, "and through his lens, it learned how to follow. How to embed itself in images. It doesn't haunt places. It haunts perception. Lauren's breath quickened. Then it's already inside me. Ruth didn't answer. That evening, Lauren returned to her apartment to find the hallway mirror uncovered. The sheet she had taped over it lay neatly folded on the floor. She didn't remember folding it. Her lights flickered as she walked past the frame. Inside the mirror, she paused. For a fraction of a second, her reflection blinked after she did, and then it smiled. Desperate, Lauren contacted Professor Jonas Klein, an old contact from Boston University who had written papers on historical photography and obscure folklore. They met 2 days later in a coffee shop near the university. She handed him the new negative. He examined it under a magnifying loupe and froze. "This is not possible," he said. "There's no digital editing on this, no tampering. And this emulsion, it's over a century old. This is a genuine plate negative from the 1800s. Lauren stared at him. "That's me in the photo." He nodded slowly. "I don't know how, but yes." Jonas sat back, visibly disturbed. "Where did you find this?" She told him everything. Jonas didn't interrupt, but he grew more and more pale as she spoke. Finally he said, "I read something once, buried in a French journal from the 1930s, about a belief that certain images could absorb identity, that, if viewed long enough, they became anchors for something else. Not a spirit, not even a person, just a watcher, a mimic." Lauren swallowed. "Can it be stopped?" Jonas looked at her, unsure. In the journal they mentioned only one solution, something about the photograph needing to be completed. "What does that mean?" He hesitated. "I think it means that the image must be finished. Someone must become part of it." That night, Lauren returned to the Historical Society one last time. She brought a Polaroid camera and a mirror. She set them up on the same table where the original photo had been scanned, placed the new negative beside it, lit a single candle. The air felt thin, almost static charged. Then she turned the mirror toward herself and waited. She thought of the children, of the sheriff, of Ruth, of herself. Then, very slowly, she saw a movement in the reflection. The children. They were standing behind her now, all three, and between them, the figure, arms draped over their shoulders like a cloak. She raised the camera, hands steady. The figure stepped forward in the mirror, inches from her. Lauren pressed the shutter. Click, flash. Everything went dark. In the morning, the Historical Society was quiet. The building smelled of burnt dust. On the table, a new Polaroid rested beside the old negatives. It showed an empty room. No Lauren, just a mirror, cracked down the middle, and in the far background, barely visible, the faint silhouette of 3 children, smiling. 2 weeks passed. Lauren McKay was officially listed as a missing person. The Ashbrook Police Department found no signs of struggle, no forced entry. Her apartment appeared undisturbed, except for the mirrors, all covered. Her phone lay face down on the table. Her laptop had been wiped clean. The only clue left behind was an unlabeled box of negatives left at the Historical Society. Inside it, 4 portraits and a Polaroid. No one could explain the image. No timestamp, no data embedded. Just a photo of the Society's workroom, empty, except for a cracked mirror and a faint outline of children, nearly invisible to the untrained eye. The official report concluded that Lauren had suffered a psychological break, stressed from overwork, from isolation, disconnected from reality. But those who knew her, Ruth, Jonas Klein, a few others, said otherwise, quietly, privately, because Lauren wasn't the only one who had seen the photo. Boston, 2 months later. Jonas Klein sat in his campus office, eyes rimmed with red. He hadn't slept more than a few hours since the day Lauren disappeared. He had tried to dismiss it all. Hallucinations, folklore, trauma projected onto images. But something was changing. Students had reported seeing shapes in the windows. 2 faculty members had resigned unexpectedly. And then there was the image, the one he kept hidden in his drawer. The copy he swore he hadn't printed, but somehow now existed. The photo of Lauren, or someone like her, standing in a mirror. He never looked at it directly, only with gloves, under glass. But lately the background had changed, bit by bit. Something new was forming behind the reflection. A 4th child. He couldn't be sure. Ashbrook Historical Society. Ruth no longer visited the Historical Society. She had resigned quietly, claiming health issues. But truthfully, she couldn't bear to be near the building anymore. Not after what she'd found in the archives the day after Lauren vanished. A journal, tucked between forgotten town meeting minutes from the year 1891. No author's name, just the words, "They live in the frame now. They do not age, they do not rest. They only wait to be seen. Looking is permission, looking is agreement." Ruth closed the journal and burned it, but still, she dreamed of a field, of 3 children, and of Lauren, now among them. She smiled in the dream. She always smiled. 1 year later, exhibition opening, Boston Museum of Photography. The flyer read, Ghosts of the Lens, A Journey Through Forgotten Negatives, curated by Jonas Klein, Ph.D. The exhibit drew national attention. Rooms filled with vintage photography from the late 19th century. Portraits, landscapes, collodion plates, artifacts of a lost era. In the final room, behind velvet rope, was a black curtain, a single photograph displayed under glass. No plaque, no date, no credit, just a dimly lit field, an old farmhouse, and 3 children standing shoulder to shoulder. Visitors leaned in, squinting at the details. Some swore they saw someone behind them. Others didn't see anything at all. But one child always seemed to be looking right at the viewer, and sometimes, rarely, when the room was empty and the lights flickered, the photo would shift, just a little, just enough.